I sat on a table down in Wellington after the show and I played this to the rest of the band. And I thought that was a good direction for the band to go in, and nobody else did. And I remember Gordon saying, well, what would I do? I don't know, ting a cymbal or something, boom, boom, on a drum a little bit, yeah. Curiously, nobody thought to ask what would I be doing, the singer, because there wasn't going to be any words in it. So I had nothing to do. But I wasn't actually worried about the fact that I had nothing to do. It was just to try and give an example of something else we could do that wasn't what we were already doing. That song, for me, that was like that first little acorn of idea for this kind of punishment was in that little piece of music. But nobody else thought so, so it got kind of forgotten. And not long after that, I was at a friend of my mother's place, a woman called Mavis Blair, and she had this really nice acoustic piano. Well, I really liked it. And I used to play away on the pianos. Around the gigs, they're not nocturnal to play in halls and stuff. There'd usually be a piano kicking around somewhere, often slightly out of tune, which is often sounds really good if you ask me. And I'd bang away on those, but I treat it like drums, just play rhythms on them. And you work out basic chords. And I had this little chart of all the piano chords that I got in out of some magazine, so you could figure them out, or at least the ones you wanted. Didn't feel like I needed a lot. And anyway, her piano just had this, it was an old London piano, it had this brilliant sustain, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, oh, God, imagine if I had that. And she sold it to me, so we shipped it up to Auckland, and as I say, I learned to play piano by getting one and just sitting down and doing stuff on it. So my piano style isn't the out the book, 1, 3, 5, there's your chord, blong, blong, da, boom, boom, blah, blah, and it's not your, and I'd love to be able to play like that, that's fine, but it's not, it's my own odd style. I found out pretty quickly that if you leave out the middle note of the chord, it's easier for the guitarists and other people to play along because they've got more options of what they can play. So I pretty quickly started leaving out the middle note if I was playing a chord with my right hand. I started using octaves for the low chords because they sounded better and bigger instead of da da da. So there's a few where I play rhythms, but mostly it's to try and just have enough boom to fill the low end, And the first one that came to anything was a song called After the Fact, and that's on the first TKP record. It's the first song on it. And I'd broken up with my girlfriend, hadn't I, Karen St. John. And that was a bad breakup because she was an amazing person and I didn't treat her at all as well as I should have treated her, and I didn't realise what a twit I'd been until after it. And even though we remained friends, because she didn't hate me or anything, but she didn't want to go out with me anymore. She had enough, and I didn't blame her. So there's just those 4 chords. Dong. Again, lots of silence, doing almost nothing, not filling in every bit all the time, hitting the E, an E octave, bong, and just being quite amazed by the sound of that, quite frankly. I didn't want anything else. I just wanted to hear that E, dong, bong, you know. But even that was collaborative, because I think Graham suggested the B. I probably would have played a C. You know, why don't you try B? It's like, okay, that one. Dong. So there's your framework for your song, and the words, and Graham just picking 2 notes. I mean, by that point he was on board with it. He got it by that point. And look how minimal he did. He left enough space that Chris Matthews would come along and pick 2 other notes, and then we could have them left and right, you know. So suddenly we'd minimalised it right down. And instead of me having to sing up there all the time, I could now, you know, who can pretend? It was a lot lower, a lot less out there. Whole different way of singing, and that changed the whole game plan. So yeah, then it was a case of me and Graham working our way through that first album, which we did. The first 2 albums, me and Graham really, really collaborated. Chris Matthews was the only other person who's on every record we've done. And we were flatting with him at the time, and he was in Children's Hour, but he was a kindred spirit. He liked the idea of TKP and helped on after the fact, and he wrote the lyrics for Just Another Funeral, which was like, I think I had the piano 2 weeks when I wrote the music for that. It was like the second thing I ever wrote. And it sat around for a bit, and one day he said, I've got these words, and it's about his grandfather dying. At the same time though, I wasn't really in a very good spot inside myself. It's fairly bleak in terms of its worldview. There's not much, you know, not many good things happening at that point. But then we got the B2B's album together. At that point we'd read somewhere that the band Wire, when they'd done the album 154, which was really amazingly structured, I think, really good record. We'd read somewhere they'd done all the music first, and then however the lyrics were going to go, and it had to be exactly like that. And so we adopted that attitude for B2B's, the second one. Well, we did for most of it. Interestingly enough, on the one Graham wrote by himself from the Diary of Herman Dowd, I don't think that attitude was adopted. I think tune and lyrics were. But anything that I ended up writing the lyrics for were written to pieces of music that, like, okay, someone has to write the lyrics for this, and I wrote them. And they were quite hard to do in that way because you couldn't move anything, you had to get it exactly right. But that worked out okay, and we still were really cooperative. But the 2 records after that, it got less cooperative. And by the last one, In the Same Room, it was sort of getting to the point we couldn't agree on anything. And I read somewhere that Graham said it was like 2 lions in the same jungle or something. And Michael Morley has said it was like a fascist state, or I think was the way he put it. I don't know who was controlling the fascist state. I guess Graham would say it was me. I don't think it was anybody, because nothing could get done. So it stopped, like anything does. Yeah. It's the best band I've ever been in. Yeah. You had 3 writers up there, and Johnny ended up writing about 2, so you could almost say 4, really. People could play different instruments. So, you know, from my point of view, sometimes I'll be up front singing into a mic, other times I'll be behind the drums, drumming and singing, or playing keyboards and singing. I think Graham pretty much stayed on guitar. He played bass on Herman Doubt, did he? I think he played that. Oh no, Chris played the bass on Herman Doubt. Again, Chris could play different things. Chris could be drumming, or playing bass, or playing guitar. And you had three people who could sing. The downside of it, if there was one, because as I say, I think it's the best band I've been in, but we didn't have an electric piano, which meant that we had to either not be able to play something if we couldn't transfer it to guitar and bass, or it became a guitar and bass version, and that made it maybe a bit more of a rock band than what I would have thought it could be listening to our records. Which is interesting now because I've done a couple of shows with Chris Matthews, and Michael Prain from Die 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 drummed on the first one, and Gary Sullivan. Sorry, Gazza. Gary Sullivan from like everywhere, because he's done so much, drummed on the second show. And we had an electric piano for this, and it was a 3-piece, not a 4-piece. Which kind of, on the first album really, it was very much me and Graham and Chris at times. And in a lot of ways, to me, that actually sounded more like I'd always thought TKP kind of could sound than what TKP did sound back then, because we didn't have an electric piano, as simple as that. And I think one of the big changes between This Kind of Punishment and Nocturnal Projections was that the central instrument on a lot of the songs became the piano instead of it always being the guitar.